Hello and welcome once again. This is part 5 of our React.js beginners tutorial. Truth is, if you understand these topics, you should be very proud of yourself. My name is Martins and this is Curly Brackets. Alright, the first thing we're going to talk about today is component lifecycle. Okay, I'm going to try to be brief in this because this is not really such a massive topic for us. It is something that you can read up on your own, but it is going to take us to the next thing that we are going to discuss in this tutorial. Component lifecycle simply means the lifecycle of a component. In React, each component has a lifecycle, like the lifecycle of a butterfly, from when the butterfly is formed to when it dies. Well, that is actually what this means in this regards too. However, we are now talking about the lifecycle of a component. For each React component, there's a life cycle which we monitor and manipulate doing each three main phases. These phases are mounting, updating, and unmounting. Mounting of a component is simply the processes that are involved when React is mounting the component into the DOM. When your project loads in the browser, something happens at the background. React is mounting those components or some set of components that makes that application possible into the DOM. And this process has other mini processes and functions that React uses to manage that phase. You have the constructor, render, component did mount, get derived state from props. And these functions have other mini features that we also use to handle that process. And after this, you have the updating. The updating of a component simply talks about the process, what goes on or what happens when that process is being updated. When we start using our component, start clicking on the buttons, start filling the forms, start running some processes in the component, we are updating that component. This is also a phase of the life cycle. And React also has some other functions that it uses to manage this phase. But the last phase, called unmounting, simply means when we are done with the component and now our React application doesn't need it anymore. It gets unmounted or it unmounts. That process is called unmounting. And also there are some other processes and some other functions that React uses to handle this process. In the past, we have things like component did mount, component will mount, component did update, and so on. If you meet any application that was written with early versions of React, you're going to see constructors, component did mount, unmount, and so many of them. You are going to see some of these functions and methods in the programs. But in the current time, React uses useEffect to handle these same processes in a more simpler form. And that is what we are going to be talking about next. The useEffect hook allows you to perform side effects in your component. Example, assuming you have an API somewhere and every time this application runs, you want the user to see all the countries in the world with their flags. We are going to see how these are going to play out using our useEffect and REST API. Let us go straight to it. So we have our application running once again. This is part of the application we were making use of before. If you remember when we did episode, we did some things using this form and we explained how to make use of forms. But today we're talking about useEffect. So here we have our home page, but then what we have is that when this application loads, we don't just want to see home page here. We want to see all the countries of the world and their flags. And to get this done, I have an API here called countriesnow.space. It has a collection of all the countries of the world with their population, location, flag, currencies, capital, and all of that. But the one we're going to make use of is this particular one right here, the flag. And you can say get countries and Unicode flags, and get countries and flags. And here we have, this is the particular API we're going to make use of. This is an operation. This particular operation contains almost, if not all, component lifecycle we talked about. In the past, we would have written a number of code to represent them or to get things done. But right now, we just have to use useEffect. So what do I need to do next? I need to first of all import use effect from React. Or I can just simply, having React here already, I can just say use effect. So okay, just take this one off. This is still the same thing right here. So I'm going to say, because I want this information, because I want this data, I want this country thing to display instantly once this application mounts. So I'm going to say use effect right here. But that's not all. It's a callback function, which means we are going to put our fat arrow right here, curly brackets, and then we're going to run our application. Then we're going to put the code that is going to call our API right here. So the next thing we need to do right now is we need to, some people, if you like, you can just do it direct, but I prefer to create another function right inside here, and I will say function, let's say get country. I get country is a function that will do the following for us. Now going to write our code here. So to consume this API, we need something, although there are traditional ways of getting it done, but I use Axios, right? So the next thing we need to do right here, we need to install Axios. Axios helps us to call API, to process API, get API, post API, and perform a lot of operations. Once we have to make use of external data and external API, Axios helps us to perform all the fetch operations in a more organized manner. So to do that, I'm going to install Axios. So let's get to, yeah, so first thing I need to do is I'm going to say npm install Axios, and then we simply sip our coffee while it installs, and then it is done. So once it's done, right now I can simply import Axios from Axios. So now the next thing I need to do right here, I need to say Axios dot get, because we are getting information right now from the API, so we're going to use the get, and then we put bracket here. Right here we're going to put the link where we're getting the information from, and that link is this one right here, because we are getting countries and the flags. So this is the link is giving us. So we paste this link here, but that's not all. When we get this, we are going to tell our code what to do next. So we say dot then perform another operation, but I can just bring in this, then bring it this here, still the same thing. So but then we say we want you to do the following. We want to use something to represent this information we are going to get from here. So let's call that in response. So this information, this response here is going to represent all the information we're going to get from here. So we're using response to represent it. Some people will say res. You can call it data if you want, anything you like. I use response a lot. So when you get this response, I want you to do the following. Now let us create. We don't want to do the following. Okay. Oh, sorry. Response like this. At this point, we need a state, right? When we bring in this data, all of these countries, we have to hand it over to a state so that the state will hold it for us. And then through that state, we'll be able to see what we have just called, right? We'll see the information and the data we just called, right? So what I need to do right now, I need to tell our computer, I need to tell our code and say const data equals to use state, but in the meantime it should have empty initial variable. But that's not just all. We can't just call it data. We need we need a function through which we can update this data. So we call that function set data. Now if this is confusing to you, then probably you shouldn't be here. You should check this channel. I've talked about useState, I've talked about couple of foundational topics. So just check the useState tutorial, and you're going to find the link to that tutorial in the description box in the description box of this video. So let's proceed. But then I don't have useState imported into this project yet, so I need to import useState, and to do that I can just do that right here. I say comma useState, or if I so like, I can still say import useState from React, right? So therefore that would be quite repetitive, so there's no point of doing that. I'll just put it right here, useState. So I'm going to say, when this is done, I want you to update this data variable here using what you get from the response. So response.data, right? So this information is going to be stored in response, and the entire thing we are looking for is in response.data. So just say populate this variable with response.data. So but that's not all. Okay, so now we have declared our function, and our function runs. So whenever this component mounts, this function here runs, but not yet. For this to run, we have to come over here and say get country. So now it runs, right? So the moment this application loads, the moment this application mounts, this guy here runs. And the reason why it does that is because we are using useEffect, right? It's as simple as that. We're using useEffect, so that is what useEffect is going to cause to happen in this application. Let us continue. You are going to enjoy this. So, but that's not all, right? That is something I don't want to do. You can try it on your own, right? So you can just try this. If you run this application this way, right? Because this API, there's a number of calls we can make per day. Okay, some APIs gives you 100 calls per 100 calls per day. Some gives you 1,000, some gives you 1,000. But of course, if it is API that you pay for, they might give you a particular number of 1,000 calls to make per day on the API. All right, in this particular one, I don't want to do this because I don't know how many calls we are giving. All right, it's not stated, but please, you can just try it. If you run this code this way, all right, this particular code here is going to run so many times, too many times. It will run repeatedly until you run out of the number of calls you're supposed to make. The reason is that is how this guy here behaves. Now, I'm going to explain something critical right here for you. Please pay attention. Every time you're making use of useState, right? Every time you're making use of useState renders the application. All right, but in most cases we can't do without it. We have to use it regardless. But useState, it renders your application, it reloads your application, right, without you knowing. So every time you're making use of useState, for an example, in this case, I said useEffect. So every time, once this component mounts, this guy here runs. But then, after it gets this data from this address, it updates our state here, this state data. So the moment it updates this state here data, this application re-renders. So it means it reloads. And when it reloads, what do you think will happen? This useEffect will run again. And when it runs again, it runs this function, and this function is right here. It gets data from this address, right? And then that address from this address, and with that address, we are telling it to store in this data right here, because really we need this state. right? But this state causes this application to render again. And when it renders again, what do you think will happen? Use effect to run again. So you have this code running repeatedly over and over and over. The first time I started making use of useState, I made this mistake, right? It ran over and over, and I was given only 50 calls to make in that particular API, and that was how I exhausted that 50 API calls without having to make use of it in my application. Now, like I said, I don't want to run this to show you what I'm saying. If you have been following this application, this development, you can go ahead and run it, all right? Because if I do this, I might not be able to continue with this tutorial because I don't know how many API calls I'm given to make here. I don't know. And I wouldn't want to test it right now, because if I do it, I won't be able to continue with the tutorial, right? Yeah. So to prevent this from running over and over again. Now, so to prevent this from happening, I really hope you understand this. But please, the code to this application is going to be in the description box, so you can just click the link in the description box and download the code so you can make use of it, right? And test out what I'm trying to say. So to stop this from happening, I'm going to put a particular, I'm going to put something here. I'm going to put this comma here, and then I'm going to tell this guy to run just once. So what this means is I want this guy to run once. So once the first one runs, it's not going to render again and run again. That is how we prevent it from happening, right? So let us save this, and then let's just say, to see what we have, let's just say console.log data. So let us see in the console what this guy here has, right? Save it, and then let's check our application. Let's inspect it. So we have an object here, and this object, let's see what it has. We have a long array, 200. So we have name, country, Afghanistan, flag. You can see the address of the flag, right? And then have name, Albania. So we have it this way all through, right? So you see there are too many countries right here. So that means, since we have this data right here now, it means we can now go ahead and make use of it, right? So to make use of it, you know what, instead of using data, because I think this will confuse you, but this is just a state variable, right? Let's call it country, and let's call this one set country. So let me not have data here so that I don't confuse you. So instead of having this here, I wanna say call this country, right? Let's check it out. Set data. We don't have set data. Oh, so we now need to say set country now. But now it has. We can see that it has 3 items, right? It has 3 specific items. One is data, one is error, and one is message. So error is showing false, so there's no error. You know, we don't have any error. So it is returning 3 items in this 3 items in this object, and then the object item that has the data we are looking for is actually this data here. Okay, so that is actually what we need. So let's check something. Let's say country.data, and let's check it have showing us. You see, we no longer have the error or the message showing. What we have right here right now is just only the data we need, only the countries and everything that they have to offer. Let's push this a little bit further. Right, this is an array. Okay. Sorry, I made a change. You know, initially we had this, right? We had empty string as the initial string of this, but that is wrong actually, because since what we are going to have in it is an array, so it should be an array. Okay, now the next thing we need to do right now is let's show that this is an array, right? We have items, and these items are numbered, right? We have these numbers 220. Actually, these are more like storage keys in the array. Then if I say data. I want to console log data 7. Let's check something first. One is Argentina, and here is the link to their flag. So let us check only data number 7, right? So let's check what we are going to have in the console. Now we have only Argentina, right? And if we say number 70, we're going to have this occupying, and that is Gambia, right? So, and if you check here number 70, you're going to see Gambia. But then we can, this is not how we are going to access the data, right? We want all of this information display in our application, not like this, right? And we don't have to start saying display number 1, display number 2, display number 3. So what do we need to do about this, right? Since this is an array, we just have to map into it, right? And if you remember when we talked about mapping, that is just what we're going to do right here. But before I do that, let me bring in some of the classes I created. The grid container. Let me bring in the classes I created so we can make this look better. So right here now we need to say country data map, right? So we need to map into this we need to map into this, and then we'll map into it. Every item in this array, we want to represent it with this word here, item. So this represents every item we have in this place. So you can call it data, or call it item, anything you like, right? So call it item, and this item, every time once we get this item, we want to render a div that has a class name. I have a class name already in my CSS, so I wanted to return this div. Yeah, so I want to return this div, and I wanted to show item dot name, right? We can see that every item has a name. The name is the country itself, and then the flag represents the image of the flag. So let's have the name first. So we just want name. Let's check our application and see what's going on. Let's see, now we have all the countries in the world represented. Okay, so let's find a way to show the flag too. We just don't want to see just the name, but we also want to see the flag, right? So what we need to do, we need to say don't just show this, also on an image, the source should be item dot flag, and then alternative message. Let's check this out. Let's check this out. Oh, we have all the countries and the flag. The flag is quite big, so let's do something about that. So let's say let's say 50px. All right, so we have it like that. We have it now, right? So we can see every country with their flag displayed, right? And that is what this get guide, that is what this API here does for us. So we can see. So what I'm showing you here is, this is how you fetch data, right? This is how you fetch external data, but that's not just it. This is simply one of the ways we make use of useEffect. Okay, so we just made it happen, and what we are doing is that once this application loads, we want every country in the world to be shown in this application, and we want them to show along with their flags, and that is exactly what we have done in this case. So if we if we want to show just one flag, right? If we want to show one country's flag, not just every country flag like we have right now, what we need to do right now is that we need to make some changes, right? We need to make some changes, and that is another thing. We're now trying to update the component, but everything we are doing, our use effect still stands for us. It still represents, we don't need to write more extra code to get this happen. Our use effect handles all of that. All right. So, and again, we can also see that as a result of this guy we have here, this stuff now runs only once. All right. Example, when we let's check this stuff again. Okay, let's clear the console so we can just clear console and refresh it. Oh, look at this, the application has broken. Now this is a problem. You're going to run into this a lot. Okay, one of the things that causes this is we can see that right here we are, once this application loads, right, application just loaded now, right, the use effect is supposed to run first, get us this information ready, but the use effect is about to run or have not run yet, but this guy here is already making demand. This guy here is already mapping into this country, and use effect is still trying to get it ready, right? Use effect is still trying to run this function in order to get the country data ready, but there is a guy here who is already making demand from the DOM and saying, give me data from this country and map into it and do all of these things. So the application is breaking. All right, it's like when people ask you for money you don't have, all right, and they are trying to insist you have it. All right, that breaks your heart, right? Yeah, that's what's happening right now to application. So when we want to do this, we just need to tell this guy to hold on. So we just put question mark here. Simple. We just put question mark here. Okay, like this one, we can put our question mark here and say, so that this way, this can only happen. We can only map into this country data if it's available. That's the reason why we have this question mark here. All right, and in this particular place, we can only access this data if the country data is available. So let's check it out again and see what we have. Everything is back. All right, so if we look at all of this data here, if we look at this data, we will see the parameters. It has name, it has flag. All right, and let's check it out. Name, flag, ISO 2, ISO 3. So let's assume we just want to see only Angola, for an example. All right, so that means we can say that because we are now trying to tune our API, so we just have to change this to post. So because we are not just getting right now, we're asking some questions. We say we want where the ISO 2, right? Where ISO 2 want where ISO 2 is this like this. So let's check the data now. Okay, our guy is broken. Let's check why it's broken. Okay, well, it's showing this here. We are seeing it's showing only Algeria, but let's find out why it's broken. It's saying data country data.map. Okay, well, it's broken simply because this information is asking here, we don't have it anymore. So let me take this off for a while. Like this, we don't have this anymore. Okay, let me just leave it here. So good, everything is back. So you can see by saying I want ISO diesel here, we have in our console just one country, right? I mean, if we change this to NG, we should have my country, Nigeria. Yeah, we have Nigeria, the flag and everything. So what do you think this implies? This implies that if we find a way, if there's a way we can enter this information in a text box, right, we can still get this. Let's try something here right now. So let us say, okay, you're welcome back. I just added this input box right here, and then with it I added some CSS classes to help our styling. So I added some CSS to help our styling, and then we just have some CSS classes here, and then we have our text box right here. So having added this, I don't need this anymore. Yes, we still have it. So if I decide, you remember what we did in state, right? So let us create a state for this guy. So let us call it search. Well, let's call it search and set search, right? Then we say so go to use state, and then it should be empty. We have empty string as the initial variable, as the initial content value, sorry. So I can say here on change, right? I set search. I want it to e dot target dot value, and here also we should have our e. Okay, and then instead of having this here, so I will say our ISO, somebody enters something, right, and that thing the person enters should be the search value now. So that means instead of having this ng here, I have to have search here. So every time someone searches something, that should be the value that so that value comes in here, and with that value we will display the country of that value and the flag. I hope I'm right with all this. So let's check ng. Let's check. Let's get an object. Okay, yeah, we have Algeria here. So let's delete it and let us check ng. Nothing is happening, right? Okay, let's type another country code. I think New Zealand is NZ. You see, it's still showing Algeria, right? Now, this brings me to what I want to discuss next. Okay, in use effects, this here means that we want this code to run once, right? Because you can see that every time we changed the value of the text box, right, what we actually expecting is that this page reloads, and when it reloads, use effect runs again on mount, right? And when use effect runs, that is when our code will now run. Not necessarily reload, right? I can say render. Okay, so not like to refresh the page, no, but to reload, like to render. Okay, so it's expected that when our page renders, okay, the application checks to note the value that is here, and that value is what it loads. It loads that particular country, if that country exists, right? It loads that particular country, and in this case, we are seeing Algeria, even though we have changed the data here multiple times. The reason is that we told our application, we told use effect to run only once. That is what this really means. So of course we can put digit here, we can say run 10 times, and this code will keep running until 10 times, but that is useless, right? So we're telling it to run once. But now in this case, we want every time we change this, every time the value of the text box changes, we want this application to render, and when it does that, use effect, we run again on mount, and that is how we can have our result. So what do you think I'm supposed to do? It means that the number of time this page renders, or the number of time use effect runs, depends on the number of times the value of this guy here changes, right? The value of the text box changes, right? So what we are supposed to do is to simply tell use effect, that the number of time you are going to render, instead of because taking this off means to render once. Okay, so if we do this, we are now saying the number of times you are going to render depends on the number of times this guy changes. Beautiful. So I think that should be able to solve our problem. Let's check it out. So now, good. So now we have New Zealand, and when we say uncut promise, it's empty, we can handle that later. So that's just saying that there's no value, right? So if we say ng, we have Nigeria, right? And if we say New Zealand, nz, we have New Zealand. So if we say, I don't know, the country AG stands for, okay, so let's use US, and that should give us United States. Okay, so let's try to implement this. All right, so this uncut promise here, let me check it. Okay, we didn't catch our error. So every time this guy is empty, it's giving us error. Okay, well, we can actually catch it. We can decide to put this entire thing. So if I use async here, and then I have to say here await. All right, so it means that our guy is going to calm down and wait for this promise, right? Instead of having to pop up an error in a hurry. Okay, so I can now say try. Okay, and I'm trying this up until here. I'm trying this here, all right? So and I'm telling it to catch anything that looks like error, arrest it. And when you arrest it, show us this message. The search box is empty. All right. So we now have the search box empty. Our application now runs properly. Let's check it again. Let's check it again. Okay, so let's check it again, and then let's say ng, we have Nigeria, right? And then if we say US, we have United States of America. Okay, so that means we can now make use of this data. Okay, thingy. We just say country dot data dot name. That is if we our app is broken. Let's check out why. Okay. If you remember the previous examples, okay, let's see why. It's trying to get data that is not available, so we do the normal thing here. Just put question mark here. I should be able to run. So let's say ng. Data is displaying here. That's not what I want, but of course we can see it's displaying. So let's just change. Okay, let's take it from here and put it here. Alright, how about that? Sorry. No, we didn't copy everything, so let's take all of this and put it right here. Okay, so it shows here. You can see when we say this, it changes to Algeria. When we say US, changes to United States. Okay, so you can see how you can use use effect, right? Because every time this application loads, right, in the background, we already have our use effect running, and it is ready to accept every information we are going to enter, and is going to use that information to query a particular API. Our use effect makes this possible. Let's try another thing. I think here, if we have country here, let's try having country here. So NG, we can now say Nigeria. Good, and we have Nigeria. Simple as that. Okay, so that is awesome, right? What happens when we don't have anything? All right, when we don't have anything. So let's just refresh this page. Okay, when we don't have anything, you see we have this grid here. I don't want that. So one thing we can do to stop that from happening is, you know the drill. If you remember our previous lessons, where we said like this is what's causing that black stuff, right? So if I put curly brackets on it and I say if country has data, we want you to show. If not, don't show. What we should do, we should say country.data. This should do it. Good. Yeah, solve the problem. So if we say Nigeria now, oh, we have, okay, say Nigeria now, we have Nigeria, and we say United States, we have United States. So, but this is not just the idea. We want to know the idea between this. The idea for this application is for us to know the flag of every country we type. So what we do is, how to do that, you can just say, just show country name, don't stop there, show us also the flag. That is the main reason why we wrote this application. We want to know the flag of any country in the world we type. So we say country.data.flag, and we also want to know the country code of that country, right? That should be nice too. So country.data.iso2. We also want to know okay, so sorry, my bad. Oh, okay, so yes, 50 px. Good. So this should solve the problem. So we want to know the flag of every country we find, and then let's just, instead of typing full country, let's just make this ISO3. So since we have that variable, so okay, the whole thing is mixed up together. Let's make it in a way that let's just beautiful. So say ng nig. Okay, I think we should use ISO2, sorry, because it's common. So just 2. So if I say ng now, that should give me Nigeria. Awesome. So, and if I say this should give me Algeria. So I now know Algerian flag, And if I say Japan, that should be Japan. And then I know Japanese flag. Beautiful. So see, this is what we just found out some of the. Thank you. This is where we come to the end of this particular tutorial, and watch out for the next tutorial on our React.js beginners tutorial, where we're going to talk about context API in React. I just want you to follow me. If you like what I'm doing here, please click on like, share the video, subscribe, tell people about this channel. Let us grow this community. See you and bye bye.